Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey Seif here, walking through the book of Acts. Thanks for going on the journey with me. In chapter 9, verses 32 through 42, we pivot away from Paul. He entered the narrative most recently, had a radical encounter with the Lord, turned his life around, and he, as we were told, became an advocate for the kingdom instead of someone trying to hold it back. We pivot from him and go back to Peter. You might recall, if you've been following me, that when you look at the book called Acts, it's referred to as Acts of the Apostles. It's really more about the Acts of the Apostle Paul than anything, but we see Peter at the first advancing kingdom purposes, and then we shift to Paul, and then back to Peter, and then to Paul, and then finally it's all about the Lord working through Paul. Luke, the author here, in effect, is writing a defense of his ministry. In any case, here we are looking at Peter pivoting from Paul in verse 32, and there's two miracles on record here. The first, in verses 32 through 5, tells the story of someone that for 8 years was paralyzed, and Peter was able to, be used to the Lord to raise him up from that paralysis. We see this kind of activity in Jesus' ministry as well, where I think raising people that were paralyzed was his favorite miracle. It's my favorite miracle because I had once had a disease called Guillain-Barré. I was paralyzed from the neck down, had to learn to walk again, and I'm thrilled. I know what it's like to not be able to move. I don't even want to go into it. In 36 through the end is another story here of a miracle that I want to look on, because herein the author seems to articulate how it just seems so unfair that this would happen to this woman in Jaffa, we're told. And we're down toward the coast now by Tel Aviv. In Jaffa, in 36, there was a disciple named Tabitha. She was full of mitzvahot and tzedakah. She was a really pious woman doing good works, following the commandments, and really righteous and pious. In other words, she was, how can I put it, a super pious woman, and it seems all the more unfair that bad things would happen to her. We're told in 37, in those days she became ill and died. When they washed her for burial, they placed her in an upstairs room. Since the city was near Jaffa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men begging, "Please come to us without delay." It reminds me, by the way, of the Elijah stories in another part of the scripture, the Hebrew Bible. These were the more famous prophets. They weren't writing prophets. They didn't write books, but their works, as well as some of their words, are noted in the book Malachim and Kings. And, they dispatched to one of these miracle-working disciples in the Older Testament, and here as well in the New. It's worth noting parenthetically here that if you look at miracles and signs and wonders, there are men that are set aside to really break some new ground, and they are endowed with this kind of miracle ministry. And Yeshua, Jesus, told his disciples that they, similar to the Elijah and the Elijahs of the bygone era, will be endowed with the supernatural. We're told when the dispatches get to Peter's, in verse 39, Peter got up and went with them. He went, he took on the assignment. And when he arrived, they took him into the upstairs room, and all the widows were crying and showing the tunics and other clothing she had made while she was with them. They were really upset. And of course, weddings are very upsetting times. But Peter sent them all outside in verse 40, we're told. And he got down on his knees and prayed. Then turning to the body, he said, "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and raised her up. Then he called the Kiddushim, the saints and widows, and presented her alive. It's a great story that reminds us that nothing's impossible with the Lord. When I'm called upon to go to hospitals or sick folk, and I am, people ask me, well, do you pray for them to rise from the dead or be healed? I leave it up to them. If If someone is deathly ill and they ask for prayer for healing, I'll pray for healing. If they want prayer to help them be ready to meet their Maker, I'm happy to attend to that as well. I don't understand myself as the one who heals or decides who gets a miracle and who doesn't, as much as I understand myself principally be a servant. It's a great story, and it's great knowing for those of us who fall upon hard times that there is a God who can help us. One of the things that I want to underscore, and perhaps I should just stick to the miracle narrative, I would like to pivot here and talk of the miracle of the Tree of Life version of the Bible, one that not only tells the story but wants to accentuate the Jewishness of it. You'll see occasionally in the literature transliterated Hebrew words that we leave there deliberately to cause individuals to go back to the glossary and study up a little bit. It's a way to tutor up and learn about the Jewish roots of the faith. There's mitzvahot noted in here, there's tzedakah, and then there's the word kadoshim, from kadosh, which means holy, mitzvot means commandments. Tzedakah speaks of righteous and pious and just. People ask, well, why do you throw these words into the text? We want people to trip over the fact that the Bible's a Jewish story. And I want to note it here that this is a young gal who's living within the parameters of a Jewish worldview, with her being careful to follow the commandments, with her being pious and the doing of good deeds. People think they accepted Jesus and they went and became Baptists or Pentecostals or Lutherans, Methodists or Presbyterians. I'm not looking to disparage other religious traditions, but I do want to underscore this believing in Jesus is transacted in a world before there were Christian denominations to speak of. To be sure, these believers met privately amongst themselves to worship the Lord, to break bread, sing songs to the Lord and about the Lord. And they would gather on the first day of the week as well to honor him. But similarly, we're told in Acts and elsewhere that they lived within the Jewish cultural religious milieu. We see earlier in Acts the disciples frequent the temple. And here, if you look at the kind of practices that this girl embraced, Luke notes that she's living a Jewish life. The Tree of Life version of the Bible is for those that want to maintain a Jewish life, not just those. I like to put it that my ministry is to help Jewish people come to know Jesus and help Jesus people come to know the Jews. There are individuals of Jewish extract that have come to know the Lord that are, many have just kind of assimilated into the larger Christian culture. Some have opted to retain a Jewish identity still. And not only that, there are individuals of non-Jewish extract who find themselves particularly attracted to things Jewish and opt to participate in this Jewish lifestyle of living and learning and worshiping. I'm of that ilk myself, but I'll take it any way I can get it from anybody that wants to give it. Anyone who names the name of the Lord is good with me. But I do want you to see here that we have a Jewish story, a young lady who's living as a Jew, and she is blessed. Well, in verse 42 and 3, we're told that one miracle is worth 1,000 sermons, and Gordon Lindsay, a Pentecostal of a bygone era, said as much, that a picture of God at work in the world of transforming circumstance does so much, and word spreads. Speaking of spreading the word, help spread the word, if you will, please, of the miracle of the Tree of Life version of the Bible. And as you spread it, tell them to come visit our website and visit me. I'll be doing this again next week. God bless you. Ciao.